Good night, good evening, and welcome to Mindful Live 438. I'm your host, Nate. Well, your co-host actually. The hosts are about their business, the divas out there. My background on my phone is popping these days, my two ladies. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. I'd recommend that people go out and make the babies. Marry people first, set up your family right, but go out and make the babies. Good times, good times, good times. But welcome once you're on the inside. Make sure you hit that like button, double tap the screen over there on TikTok. If you're wondering how to hit the like button over there on TikTok, you hit the screen 2 times. Real quick, quickly hit it again and again and again. What are your thoughts on country? I don't know who that is. I'm sorry, I just, is that the Batman that people speak of? That's the name that's who rings a bell when you say that name. I don't know his surname, so I don't know if that's who you're talking about, but I just don't know who that is. Go? I don't know, so I can't speak. Populate the country, make us some good little Trinis out there. And hit that like button, share the video. If you're viewing this on repeat over there on YouTube, you can feel free to share it also. Drop a comment, tell me what you think, leave a little heart, now leave a thumbs up, leave a something. Allow me to know you're out there and you're listening and this is some good stuff. I won't mind. Hit that like button, leave a comment, share it. But we're jumping into the news. Out of Tobago one time, going over to the sister isle and seeing some of the stuff out there. There's a new senator freshly appointed out of the sister isle out there, and he has some stuff to say about Tobago's development and the direction that it's going in. Double palm instead of sandals. Double palm instead of sandals. Newly minted government Senator Ansel Dennis said yesterday that Tobagonians have missed out on major tourism opportunities that a 5-star sandals resort could have brought, and instead have a double palm hotel. Well, White Leather, that's kind of my sentiment. Support local. In delivering his maiden contribution to the budget debate at the Senate sitting, Dennis criticized the opposition United National Congress for being an obstruction to the country's progress. He said Tobago's tourism sector would have been significantly transformed with Sandals, a Marriott hotel, the new marina, and the new airport terminal. The Sandals resort, he said, would have required thousands of eggs and produce. Hi, host. What are you doing in these parts? Tell the people good night. Good night. So what's up, folks? Tell them what's up. What's up? Oh, you have to show them there. What's that you're showing them? What's that? What's that? Trying to snap? Yes, she is. She is. Nicely and quickly. Yeah. He said that hotel would have required thousands of eggs and produce, and agriculture would have benefited significantly in both Tobago and Trinidad. Sandals would have created linkages between Tobago and other international destinations, he added. But we shelved that. And you know what we have in Tobago now, Mr. President? You know what the big investment in Tobago is, apart from the Marriott that central government brought? Double palm, he said. You know, ha ha ha, Anika, do not rebuke that fever. Feel it. Feel the heat build. Allow your ovaries to sing the tunes. You hear that beautiful voice? The innocence in the voice? Where are you going?
I'm going to pick it up.
What are you going to pick up?
I'm going to pick up myself.
Don't pick up anything there. You don't worry about that. Yeah. You hear that voice? You hear that voice? The voice. Look your pig. You don't want your pig? The voice, that beautiful innocence, the angelic softness in a child's voice. Nothing compares to it. That experience of holding your child and feeling them fall asleep in your arms, seeing them look at you in your eyes, call you mommy. Trust me, do not rebuke that fever. Feel the warmth and embrace it. I am out here to raise our birth rates. I'm just letting you all know. I am attempting to raise the birth rates, and I'm not even hiding it. Go make the listen. We need people to pay our pension when we reach old. If the baby fever and the emotion of it isn't working, allow the logic of it to work. If we don't make enough people, when we reach 70, there will be no 20-year-olds to pay our pensions. You know, our pension is not paid by the money we save in it. That money you giving to NIS and whoever else. That's not what gives you your pension. That money is gone. The next generation, when they are paying into their pension, that's what pays yours. Mikhail Modesto, the furniture is already being jumped off of. So, I mean, yeah. I know. But over in Tobago, like, listen. I understand the point they're making, because what he's talking about is the direct investments. What they want is that massive foreign investment, that massive injection of that foreign capital that comes like bam, and a whole resort is there just like that. I wonder though if there may not be some benefit in the double palm route. Now, I'm not necessarily saying this in the most literal sense of double palm itself, but in the local route where you grow organically, if double palm is there and they start growing, they are profitable, wouldn't they expand? Wouldn't they eventually get larger? And Double Palm has shown that, you know, they are willing to invest in more buildings and more buildings and more buildings. So I don't think that's a bad thing. That may actually be the next best thing. I wonder if it was possible to, as a country, encourage investment in like 50 double palm style, not style, style may be the wrong thing, because maybe double palm style is not what we want. Double palm sized establishments. If we had 50 of those instead of one Sandals, what would be the long-term benefit versus the disadvantage of that? The cost benefit analysis of that. You check out 50 double palm sized establishments versus one Marriott Sandals style, and I wonder which would be different, which would be better. The investment here to sell us something, but no one is bringing their manufacturing here. That's a reality. Because with Sandals, although you would get much more in the jump at the start, you would have much more. I wonder though, in the long term, where would it go? Like, what percentage of the money that Sandals makes would stay in the island of Tobago versus what percentage of the money Double Palm makes stays in Trinidad and Tobago? I mean, I believe the owner may be of Guyanese heritage, but he lives in Trinidad and Tobago. I am pretty sure he's by now a Trini citizen. So, where would we get more out of? Would it be best, maybe, if we do actually encourage that line of investment? More Double Palms by all means. Or is it that the resort size and style of a Sandals would be just something so irreplaceable that nothing local investment can do would compare? Is that the case? I remember we were discussing this before when the chief secretary was talking about making Tobago into more of an ecotourism kind of resort and all of this and all of that. Wouldn't smaller locally owned establishments fit into that line of development more? I don't see a problem with Two Palms. There are motels all over the US. Yes, they are. But I suppose from the Tobagonian view, exactly, Ryan Jag. But from the Tobagonians' view, they would be looking for that one massive investment that would employ 600 people on and off, that will dump 350 million US dollars into the Tobago economy within a 2-year period. And then from thenceforth, every 150 people will be permanently employed, with 300 occasional seasonal employed, and that's the kind of, you're looking at those numbers, those hard numbers that you get from those massive multinational companies. And Double Palm wouldn't necessarily give you those kind of numbers. Why we can't have both? Michael Modesto says, I presume we may be able to, but what the senator is complaining about here is that he is saying the UNC chased out the Sandals Resort and that we are just left with the Double Palms only, and it's a complaint that we aren't receiving that massive surge of investment with the Sandals Resort anymore. It's a complaint about Sandals leaving. But I have heard from some people that many of those larger multinational companies and resorts, the majority of their money flies out of the island. And the thing with a Sandals and a Sandals size investment, very likely there would be government money going into that, government outputting at the jump. So yes, some money will spread across the island and all of that good stuff, but sometimes those things fail. How is the Magdalena Grant doing? Wasn't that a massive government investment in that? How is it doing? Has the Magdalena Grant paid back for itself yet? I honestly don't know. This is a legitimate question. I don't know. Has it? And, this is the thing that makes me wonder sometimes. And you see this regularly in government circles. To me, I see this regularly in government circles. Let's not go for the small, modest, incremental growth that we know is going to give us some positive change? No. Why don't we have the government's coffers? Why don't we go for the massive go one time? But every time we go for the massive go, all we're doing is losing a massive amount of money. I think an investment of that size is a forex generator. Yes, it is, and I'm saying that's what they're talking about, the massive injection of the how much ever hundreds of millions of US dollars in at the jump at the start to get it even done in the first place, and then the attraction of foreign tourists, people to be the residents, tenants, The word slips me. We don't see forex struggles in Barbados, Mikhail says. I don't think the forex struggles of Trinidad and Tobago, though, are really just about getting that investment from our sandals. Like, I do not think if Tobago built sandals out in no man's land out there, that by the next 3 years, Trinidad and Tobago would not be seeing the forex troubles we get. Because I wouldn't doubt, if you were to put the numbers on paper, that we get much more forex coming in than Barbados. But there are some dark and mysterious things that goes on with our forex. And you hear regularly economists talking about floating our dollar and dollarization and all of that to get away from the manipulation. Our central bank, our those in charge of our economy, there is manipulation as it comes to forex and the trade of it. There is that. So I don't think that it's just a foreign investment that's going to fix the forex issue. So you can't sell me, not saying you're trying to do that necessarily, Mikhail Modesto, but I don't think someone would sell me on the idea that the way to fix our forex problems, the forex problems that we are currently facing, is to get our sandals to come in. I just don't believe it. And I mean, Barbados is one to talk about, eh? Maya hoping to turn region's debt into development, and Barbados knows a whole lot about that. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley is seeking to turn Caribbean debt into a resource for crucial development and sustainability. In July, Barbados entered into a deal with the European Investment Bank and Inter-American Development Bank to provide a US $300 million debt guarantee. Under the arrangement, the savings from the debt swap will be used to fund projects that improve water supply and security and reduce pollution. The Barbadian Prime Minister, who is set to become the next chair of CARICOM shortly, said she will pitch a similar approach to other member states when she takes up that role. She explained the move as a speaker during a session entitled Climate Voices Catalyzing Private Finance Barbados, Debt for Climate Conversion at the International Monetary Fund annual meeting in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. So, I don't know necessarily if Barbados's route might be the one we want to take with all of that debt and attempting to now use the debt as a resource and all. Maybe that might not be the ideal. It may not. But staying over in Tobago, though, moving away from the double palm talk, Farley denies blaming mothers alone for Tobago crime. We spoke about this in the last live Monday, where the Tobago chief secretary seemed like he blamed, well, not seemed, from the words they quoted, he blamed the Tobago mothers for the level of crime. They're allowing the drug dealers to sit down in the house. How are your mothers allowing this? And even back then, I was saying, Monday, I was saying this, that it seems like a strange blame to me. It seems like a strange blame because if you are looking at this from that more traditional point of view, which it seems like he was, then you're saying that the man is the head of the home, and then shouldn't that be the man gets the blame first? Shouldn't that be where the blame is? And to me, I see it as a display of the breakdown in the family structure in the first place, where you even see it as being the mother's responsibility. That's not where your view of where it's supposed to be fixed already shows the breakdown. Bro, why I hardly see you on live TikTok? I don't know. Maybe they're fighting me. THA Minority Leader Kelvin Morrison, political leader of the PDP Watson, you call comments out of time and a nasty direct attack on mothers. In a Facebook Live on October 21st, Augustine said people were misconstruing his message. He said the public was resistant to taking responsibility. He said fathers and other members of the family have a role too, as well as the various religious institutions. It is a speech about all of us taking responsibility. Well, here's the thing, Mr. Fally. When you're in those kind of positions, you have to make those speeches clear in the jump, at the jump. Good night, Otis. You have to make that clear at the jump. You can't come now to attempt to edit the speech and say, well, this is what I actually meant, guys. Because no, I don't send invites, Otis. Am I supposed to? I just jump in the live and go. I'll start to send out some invites. I'll start to send out the invites. Where are those invites? How do you send these invites out? Where do I share this? I'll have to look at that some other time, because I don't even know. Yeah. That's something you kind of have to say at the jump, Mr. Farley. Waiting to the end to now add in, well, what I meant was the fathers too, eh? What I meant was the fathers. It's kind of late to try and say that. You were supposed to kind of say that at the jump. Good Lisa. Yeah, of course people would jump in on that. But he's getting a tongue lashing. Founder of Tobago NGO Women of Substance, Sonika Mars, told Newsday she found Augustine's comments to be reckless and irresponsible and called for him to apologize. Women carry the burden a lot of times, and the chief secretary is aware of that. There are a lot of single mothers, and because of society and its structure, a lot of women are forced to do several jobs. How could he lay blame on the mothers? She questioned why the same energy was not used to hold men accountable for their own actions. It's not like he said parents. How could you say mother? It is totally incorrect, irresponsible, and I call on him to retract his statement and apologize. I wonder if he would. I don't think he would. I think he just edited the statement. But there are several issues that are gender focused, it seems, of late. State TTPS media must responsibly address gender-based violence. The UWI St. Augustine Campus Institute for Gender and Development Studies is calling on the state to treat cases of gender-based violence and related issues with greater urgency and care amid the upsurge in violent domestic-related incidents in the past few months. The TTPS and the media were also urged to show greater sensitivity and empathy when it comes to dealing with victim survivors and or relatives affected by gender-based violence. In a media release, the Institute called on the Ministry of National Security, the TTPS, and the media to treat gender-based violence with empathy and sensitivity. It also made several recommendations. You know, I don't like this. I don't like this. I think violence should be treated as violence. It's like when people talk about not just justice, but social justice. I don't like that. Or racial justice. I don't like that. If justice is just, it does not need a qualifier. Similarly, why should there be some special qualifier for violence against certain people versus certain people? Why? What's the basis for it? So, is it that as a country, we are supposed to look at men being dealt with violently in a different light than we are supposed to look at women being dealt with violently? And you know why that's a strange thing for me? Because, like, for me generally, as a more traditional guy, someone who subscribes to a more traditional view of life, I agree that women and men aren't the same and we should be treated differently and looked at differently. But my problem is most of the people who say things like this, I am pretty certain this gender, the Institute of Gender and Gender Development Studies in the university, I am pretty certain that that institute would call for gender parity and gender equality and gender equity and all of this kind of stuff. So if the genders are equal and should be treated equal, then how can you also call for differing treatment in them and violence? The Ministry of National Security, they went on, and the TPS should use the $6.9 billion allocated in the 2025 budget to work with the university to develop a comprehensive GBV sensitization program. Of course, they are looking for work too. So use the money in the budget to pay the gender experts in UE to develop a plan for dealing with gender-based violence. Well, here's the thing. For me, we are a violent country on a whole, heading up the road to 600 murders apparently. Why should we spend any extra cent giving to some gender studies program to tell us how to deal with violence? Shouldn't that violence be dealt with in general? Like, do you think if somehow we could reduce the murders and the violence in general, if Trinidad's murders went down from the 600 to 50 murders per year, don't you think the number of women murdered and hurt would drop too? El Salvador recently dropped from, where were they at, 2,000 something to less than 100 something or something like that. Do you think the gender-based violence in El Salvador dropped too? And for that to happen, did they have to go consult a gender expert from the university on how to make sure no more women are killed? Or is it just that they had to reduce the violence in the entire of the country? And as the violence is reduced, obviously the violence against everyone will be reduced. Like, why is this something special? So, is there supposed to be some kind of special Negro-based violence? So should we have a NBV, the Negro-based violence, or the race-based violence organization to look at, because Negro people suffer from violent crime at a different rate than their compatriots in the society. So the government should go and pay those Cambon and those guys, Shabaka Cambon and those other Afro Studies guys, pay those guys to come up with a Negro-based violent plan. A race-based violence plan so we can reduce the amount of Afros being violently hurt. How would something like that sound? I think they are looking at gender-based violence from the perspective of domestic violence. Well, one, I don't like those euphemistic terms. Good night, Eric. I don't like those terms. Well, call it domestic violence. You see, when you call it gender-based violence versus domestic violence has the understanding that it isn't gender-based. It's location and relationship-based. So, okay, that can make some sense because now you're talking about a different type of violence going on. And if you look at it as a domestic-based thing, then you could do studies that show that actually in the majority of cases in domestic violence, there's violence going both ways. Men to women and women to men. So it's not an issue that you have to go and speak to the men about how they violently treat their women. No, you have to speak about relationships in general. Most women experience violence from their partner. What? I think you misphrased that, Otis. You might say most women who experience violence experience it from their partners. Are you saying that the majority of women out there experience violence from their partners? Because I don't believe that. That is rubbish. And if you look at the statistics, the majority of one-way violence, one way, as in one person in the relationship being violent to the other, it's actually from the woman. Most domestic violence is violence that goes both ways. Now, the reality is men are more aggressive. Men are capable of a much more severe degree of violence. So if the tata hits the fan proverbially, it's very likely going to spray in one direction. And that is a reality of domestic situations. If it boils over, most of the times the boil over happens on the side of the person who has the bigger flame. But to look at it from a gender-based view belies the truth, where it's not necessarily something where men are more aggressive and insulting towards women. It's something where men are stronger. There's a strength imbalance. So if there's violence in a relationship and it's all going to hell, it's going to go in a certain direction. I meant the women who experience violence experience it from their partners, right? Correct. A lot of that is the case. But as I said, that's not a gender-based thing. That's a relationship-based thing. I could get along with that as a domestic violence issue, where we then look at both parties, we look at relationships in general, we look at aggravation, we look at aggression inside of the relationship, we look at provocation, we look at violence that doesn't lead necessarily to death, we look at people who slap their partners. I feel if you were to quantify the amount of slaps between partners, you would get more women slapping more men in relationships. You would get something like that. But you see, when you look at it as a gender-based issue, then you get these gender scholars telling us about victim blaming. So then we cannot look at it from the domestic relationship aspect, where we put accountability on the entirety of the relationship to hold this relationship in a sensible kind of balance. No. We look at it as male versus female. And we don't blame the females. We don't blame the victims. These are victims. This is victim blaming. So we can't actually deal with this domestic violence issue truthfully. We have to deal with it as a gender-based thing, and the women are the victims, the men are the perpetrators, and that's all we could deal with it as. And that's rubbish. That's not going to solve the issue. And here's the thing, as I was saying Monday, I believe, stop poking the bear. The West world keeps poking this bear, and I'm telling you all, looking out at the Western world, they're looking for the bear to attack. Who is the bear? Young males. Listen, you might not like this as a feminist scholar. If you are a feminist scholar there, you might not like this reality, but the reality is, if all young men decide they don't like what you're doing with society, society is going to evaporate. They are going to destroy your society and drag us all down to the abyss with them. So stop poking that bear. You actually need those young men to be invested in the society and to agree with what you do. You can't just drag them along and do with them as you please. You have to have that discussion with them. It's not that men bad, women good, and we deal with it as that in that gender-based nonsense perspective. It's a relationship, and some relationships are toxic, some relationships are unhealthy, and most of the times in those unhealthy relationships, it goes in multiple directions. So there needs to be some victim blaming going on. We need to blame some victims and look at it as a holistic thing if we actually want to solve it. I mean, if you want it to just be that we run in and lock up young men and deal with them like that and leave the women without any questions about anything because they are the victims, then you will not get a solution. Things would get worse, and you would poke the bear until the bear bites you. We don't want that. it added that this is the gender institution in UE. It added that there was a need for protection orders to activate a much stronger mechanism of support, considering the number of women that have been killed even after getting such orders from the courts. Media personnel must be mindful of how the sensitivity of language needs to form part of their reporting on incidents of GBV. While sensationalizing helps to increase traction, consideration must be given to survivors or victims and their families. And here's the thing, why isn't that a consideration for everyone? Why should the victims of domestic violence situations be treated any different than the victims of a robbery? So the media should check their language when speaking about victims of domestic violence if they are women, but not when a victim of a robbery makes the news, or a victim of a random murder makes the news. That they should hold back. They should continue in their normal sensationalist point there. But once you reach to women in domestic issues, now you have to stop. You see, it's the kind of ridiculousness of feminism. The ridiculousness of feminism is they hated the special treatment of women in the chivalrous style, where men are seen as the leaders, and as the leaders they treat women with a certain level of adulation and respect, and put them on a pedestal to some extent. No, we don't want that. All of us are equal. We can all do the same thing every week. And then after they do that and change society to equalize it, then they turn around and say, well, now we want special treatment. We want back that chivalry by force. You could have had this chivalry, but you can't have the equality and the chivalry. You can't have the equality and the special treatment. The Institute added that GBV incidents should be addressed in health policies and protocols, describing it as a health, social protection, and multi-sectoral issue. It said health practitioners should be educated in providing psychological and emotional support rather than physical treatment. The release called for state bodies employed to assist in the protection and support of survivors of GBV to commit to ensuring that they treat every case with due diligence regardless of the case history of the victim or personal beliefs. Shouldn't that be the case with all victims? Why is this something for gender-based violence alone? Like, I don't understand why. Why? I don't get it. But here's a commentary from one of our prominent, I believe she's a feminist, who was speaking on a similar issue like this. Listen to this carefully. We are in a deep crisis. The article is in the Newsday, Violence Anywhere, Everywhere, by Dr. Gabriel Jamela Hossein. We are in a deep crisis rooted in our current ideal of dominant and violent masculinity. This is not an attack on individual men. It does not mean that all men and boys are invested in this ideal. Rather, it is a naming of the gendered ideas around which our society is organized and their impact on both men and girls and women. It is not that men are born bad, far from it. They are born as human beings capable of being caring and investing in gender, sexual, and socio-economic justice. Dominant and violent forms of masculinity nonetheless teach what is normative, valorized, and constitutive of manhood itself, but it is not who men are meant to be. How does a woman know what men are meant to be? Who are you as a woman to say what men are meant to be? As is well established, gang violence is a form of gender-based violence principally enacted by and among subordinate men. You know, in this view, if gang violence is a form of gender-based violence, then all violence is somehow gender-based, because aren't all people either one gender or the two genders? Aren't all people either one gender or the other? If gang violence is gender-based violence, then all violence is which is not gender-based violence in that case? Gang violence is a form of gender-based violence principally enacted by and among subordinated men, and it is exacerbated by and expressed through masculine ideals which harm men, both those murdered and those dehumanized as killers. Citizens are living in panic because of robberies and shootings overwhelmingly perpetrated by men. Men fear other men just as boys mainly fear other boys. Yes, you have discovered that men have a monopoly on violence. That men are by far the stronger of the sexes, and they are by far the more violent and aggressive of the sex. Wow, you have discovered what humankind has known since before time. Grand. Well done. And yes, the most violent people in our society is and has always been and will always be men. You are not going to magically socialize men out of being capable of more violence than women. There's no kind of socialization and education that you could do to neutralize the aggression and greater strength of men as compared to women. That's not going to happen. On the other hand, there's also a resilient bro code that keeps the rules of heteronormative masculine power and the men who abide by it safe. You know what's ridiculous about this? There are gangs established by women. There are gangs with gay men, with homosexuals. But the heteronormative masculine culture of the gangs is the issue. I guess if we had less toxically masculine homosexuals, if we had less toxically masculine, more homosexuals moving around our society, we would have had a better society. Therefore, it isn't that men fear all other men. They fear possible violence that can be perpetrated by any other man. Similarly, for women, it is not that all men are a threat, and it is not that there are not many or a majority of good men, but that any man could be a threat to girls and women, and that enough men perpetrate harm that to be a girl or woman living in the world is to live under the constant threat of male violence anywhere and everywhere. You know what's so ridiculous about this article? This doctor went on to describe that men in general in society are concerned about violence from the violent men in society, and they always live with that worry. And then she goes on to use that to explain this is to show why women are really concerned about the same thing. Like, you're saying the same thing there. Any man could be a threat to girls and women, and enough men perpetrate harm that to be a girl or woman living in this world is to live under the constant threat of male violence anywhere and everywhere. That's true for men too. Let me put man in there. Any man could be a threat to boys and men, and that enough men perpetrate harm that to be a boy or man living in the world is to live under constant threat of male violence anywhere and everywhere. That's true of everyone. Everyone who lives under the threat of violence, which is everyone in the world, lives under the threat of male violence, because pretty much all the violence that exists is male violence. So we all do. We all live under the threat of male violence, but it isn't male violence, it's violence perpetrated by majority men. That's not male violence. There's a difference. And it's not special to women. If you were to look statistically, men are at a greater risk of that same violence than women. Far greater risk. And I'm talking about innocent men here. Not men involved in the gang war. Not men involved in crime. I'm talking innocent men going about their duties. They are more at risk. She says, we want men to do the hard groundwork of stopping this among their brothers for the sake of their sons and other boys who could be victims of bullying or another shooting statistic, or just want a more peaceful world, and for the sake of their daughters and other women whose lives are constantly disturbed by a desperate urgency to transform patriarchal masculine ideals. You know what's amazing here? She says she wants the men to do the hard groundwork, but then goes on saying that women are trying to transform the patriarchal masculine ideals. But isn't wanting men to do the hard groundwork a patriarchal masculine ideal? That sounds like some kind of patriarchal masculine stuff. If you're saying that this is the duty that's reserved for the men. Huh? Why? Now, I feel like, because I spoke about an article that this doctor wrote before, I wonder if this paragraph was directed at me. To understand the world in which women live, you must really listen, not go on TikTok to aggressively attack women's words. Ask whether you really understand why women feel the way they do, and if you don't understand, what is it you are not hearing? To understand the world in which women live in. Did she not just get done saying we all live in this same world? The same world where we are all under the threat of violence? Do you think that as a man you are less under the threat of violence? Is that it? Are us Trini men living in a different world than the Trini women? That, you know, us Trini men, there's a bro code, you know. When the male bandits come in, they look at the fellas in the place and say, yeah, fellas, you know, is fellas stand up for each other. Toxic masculinity on one, yeah. And only rob the women. Is that what goes on? Is it that men live in some kind of different reality? What are we seeing? Maybe because I may be aggressively attacking women's words on TikTok again. So maybe the next article might be directly aimed at me. And you know, this is not to negate the fact that there are horrible men that do horrible things to women. I think, though, as I said previously, that's a symptom of the increased violence in our society in general. Like, if we were living in a society where there were no murders, and then all of a sudden all you seeing is men killing women all about the place, then you could say, yes, something is suspicious with that. But we're living in a society with 600 murders. 600 is where we're looking for. And the vast majority of those are men. So why would you be surprised that a growing amount are women too? Like, if the murder rate is increasing, isn't it expected statistically that the amount of women murdered would also be increasing? And this is not to say that's a good thing, but it's obvious. It's like when you look and you see that 5 women died on the job last year, and we have got to get that number down, and you see 500 men died on the job, and I have to ask myself, okay, if you're saying that too many women are dying, Is it that enough men are dying? Like, why would you put a gendered scope on that in a violent country where too many people on an entirety are dying? Why would that be put into gendered lens? And as I said, if you're telling me you want to put it into domestic lens, then put it into domestic lens, where it's based on the relationship, not based on the gender. You see, as I said before, based on the relationship. Oh, Crusade 68, we're talking gender issues. If it's based on the relationship, then that's a different angle we attack. You see, when it's based on the gender, it's why you hear nonsense like this where we're looking at men to do the heavy lifting. Like, if me as a man, it's my duty to go and get the men who kill their wives in Trinidad, it was my duty to speak to them like they are my brethren. None of my brethren hurt their wives, you know. I don't line with any men who are out there beating women. Those aren't my brethren. So what exactly are you aiming for me to do? What am I supposed to do in this situation? But if you tell me based on domestic violence, where it's based on the relationship, not a gendered lens we're looking at it through, but relationship lens, where, okay, and this is how we look at crime often, where, okay, this is gang related homicide, so we look at this based on the style of relationship these people were in. This is gang related, so we understand where this comes from. This is domestic violence, so we understand it's a relationship based something. It's not necessarily a gender based thing, because as I said, the violence in most relationship goes both ways. It's just that the men have a monopoly on being the stronger ones. Hi. But we continue speaking about gender-based violence, I guess. You see, if you have a university with an entire faculty and institution that focuses on studying gender, of course they would say that we have to look at this through gendered lens. Of course they would, because that's where their entire degree is based. But we are a violent country. In totality, we are a violent country. TNT heading for new murder rate. Senator slams government for recycling failed crime-fighting measures. Independent Senator Suniti Maharaj yesterday criticized the government for what she called recycling of failed crime-fighting measures. In a contribution to the budget debate at the Senate sitting, Maharaj stated that this country is heading for a new record murder rate. With murders at the current rate, it would be a surprise if we did not establish a new record this year, probably between 630 and 650 murders. I hope not, she said. Organized crime continues to be a problem, with the gangs being the minions of the chiefs, she added. Maharaj said crime has crossed a threshold where criminal acts are random and opportunistic. She said that a person may not even have the intention of committing a crime, but they see someone walking down the road with a handbag, they may be moved to rob that person. It is becoming the thing to do just to get a few dollars. It is random, it is opportunistic, it is anywhere, anyhow, anytime, any day, she said. Acknowledging crime fighting measures in the budget, such as new police cars and increased expenditure in communities, Maharaj remarked that these initiatives have been tried before. before. If crime is on the increase, those measures are not working. And so the question is, what is under this that is capable of being resolved at a fundamental level to effect change? I see nothing of that in the budget. What I see is a replication of the same failed measures, she said. I agree with her. And I think this is the general issue in Trinidad and Tobago. We are becoming more and more violent. We are becoming more and more violent. And as the country becomes more and more violent, there would be more opportunistic violence that pops up. You see, if 700 murders could escape in a country of 1.3 million, then people would more and more start to think, well, my little thing that I want to do could escape too. The less people that are held accountable for their criminal actions would encourage more criminal action in the country. And that's what I think is happening. And that's why we see, even on the gender-based side, more women are being hurt too, because more people are being hurt. So the willingness to hurt people is increasing. And if the willingness to hurt people is increasing, the willingness to hurt women would increase because they are people. The willingness to hurt children would increase because they are people too. I am sure there are more children being hurt now also. Why? Because more people in general are becoming victims of crime. It's getting worse. And if it continues to get worse, it will keep getting worse. And I don't think that we could section out one little group, as the country spirals the drain going down to 650 murders. Let's make sure that no women are killed in that barrage. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get that to happen. No. It's not how it works. That's not how it works. Let's jump into my last article for the night. My last article for the night. Yes, men frustrated by the rejection of no work and taking it out on their woman counterpart, which is unfair. Is that true, Chris? 868? Is it true that men are frustrated because of no work and that's why they take it out on their women counterparts? If we go through the accounts, the last few accounts of women being murdered by their partners, would we see that those men are men who lost their jobs and were down in the doldrums because of their depression? Or would we see that those were violent men who beat the women for years and this is just the culmination of a violent man acting on a victim? Like, I don't like the idea of suggesting that somehow if a man loses his job, all of a sudden he loses his decency and he's going to go home and beat up his wife. I don't buy that. That's similar in line to me of the poverty causes crime kind of thing, where because people are poor, they lose their morals, they go and be criminals. I don't think men are becoming unemployed and that's why they beat up their wives. I don't think that's the case. I think if an unemployed man is beating up his wife, he was beating up his wife while he was employed too. Reality. And understanding that as the reality, well, I want to know to all this. I want to know. Understanding that as the reality, I think you get into the side of understanding why, like the Prime Minister said a couple of years ago, and they wanted to drag him through the sewers for it. You have to be careful about the choices you make. Because it's not that your husband is going to lose his job and come home and all of a sudden become a monster and start to beat you. No. Chances are, if that man is going to beat you and attempt to kill you 10 years down the road, you're going to see lots of signs of that right now. Right now. You're going to see those signs. And you need to be able to pick up the signs and leave that man alone. But you see, if you see things like that, it sounds like you're blaming the victim. If you look at it from the gender-based view of men going out there and just committing violence against women, how dare you blame the women for that? It's only men who commit the violence. But if you look at it as a relationship, someone who chose to be in a relationship with a violent person, then you could look at it as a relationship where we have to be more careful how we choose our relationships. And that's actually where the genesis is. These men could die alone with no children and no love. And we would never know how much they always wanted to beat women, because no woman would lie down in a bed next to them. That's your aim. Your aim as a woman is to make sure all wife beaters never reproduce. And you know, women as a group, they could decide that. No wife beater should have a child. No wife beater should have a wife. We shouldn't even know you're a wife beater. All we know is you're that weird guy who are a little too violent and sporadic, but no woman really like you, so we don't know who you're going to hurt. You're going to stay beating frogs and stray dogs for your life. And eventually the society would pick up on how bad you are, and maybe we might deal with you differently. Instead of some woman going and lying down with this man for 12 years, taking licks, bringing children into the world to take licks, and then unfortunately the man doing what he was always aiming to do and ending it all. Of course it's the man's fault. Of course, he shouldn't have done that. But this is a monster man. You shouldn't be with that man in the first place also. And that's what you understand when you look at it from the relational point of view. People are in relationships with these men. How are you trying to tell me that in a violent country where the gangs are responsible for so many of our crimes, we have women out there who are Instagram famous IG bodies who are known for being the girlfriend of gangsters? And they are promoted. Companies have them as their advertisers. They are the models for companies. They are the role models for young girls looking up. They are the brand ambassadors, Willie Bang. She is the known side chick for a gangster who we know out here murdering people. But she is recognized and welcomed in common polite society. And then if God forbid, because I don't want anything to happen to any one of them, but if something happens to them, then we are all supposed to gasp and grab our pearls, clutch at our pearls and be like, oh my goodness, gender-based violence. Why are men so abusive? Listen, don't put men in that nonsense. I am not in the same group with those guys. You went and chose those guys. My wife don't have that to worry about. IG bodies. Everybody know who your man is. But we as a society, we cool with that. That's normal. That's norms. Norm stuff. Brand ambassador for this and that and the other. I mean, even Rihanna, bad girl Riri, isn't her baby daddy an ex-gangster on a gun charge for reportedly shooting at one of his besties? What? What we doing here? And then if, God forbid, something happens on the inside there, we'll all be shocked. How? What? No, nah, not that one. No, boy. You see how men dirty? You see men, and jumping to blame men. That is not men, that is that man. And that's the man that you all chose. Let me go talk about the indigenous people before I get in trouble on this topic, eh? Having 2 daughters, I not on that folly with all you. I just letting all you know how they. Me and that folly, we not on that folly together. Leave that folly where all you find it. And don't bring it this side. Let me talk about my indigenous brethren, eh? Warao shaman. The Warao shaman is saying, stop inaccurate carnival portrayals. Shaman of the Warao community of San Fernando and Separia, Raul Simon, wants October to be declared Indigenous Peoples Month. Wait. Which indigenous person? You're talking about the king who ride a... Are you talking about the chief who rode across the country on horseback? Is he cussing people? Good night, Himk. Why would you call the man Yankee Doodle? What kind of disrespect is that? What kind of demeaning language is that? Put respect on the chief's name, eh? Who chose him as chief, by the way? Who chose him as chief? I'm just curious. When was this indigenous election held? I don't know. Maybe they did. At the close of the 2024 Indigenous Festival last Saturday, he called on the Education Ministry to make the declaration and allow schools to participate in related events. Simon was speaking at the closing ceremony of the festival, which ran concurrently with the country's Heritage Week celebrations and came to an end last Saturday at the San Fernando North Community Center. He said the group was also demanding full access to the sacred Nabarima Hill and all of its sacred sites. A denial of this, he said, would attract litigation. Listen, I don't know the man's claim to chief. I don't know. I am not part of the tribe, so I don't know. What you want me to say? The man say he's a chief and he riding in the country on a horse. What am I going to say? All right, chief. This group of indigenous are demanding that they have access to the Nabarima Hill and all of their sacred sites. So, this is the interesting thing with multicultural nations. Nations that attempt to incorporate all cultures basically equally. How do you deal with some of those things that are already the way they are in history? The article I saw about the horse dying was from Late O'Clock News. I believe Late O'Clock News is satire. So I don't know if the horse actually died. As far as I know, Late O'Clock News is satire. So that could just be a joke. But yeah, how much provision do you give to every group in the country? This group is saying if they don't get access to all of their sacred sites, they're going to sue. They're bringing litigation. But what if their sacred site is now in the vault of a bank? What if a native sacred site is located where now a bank was built and that's where their vault is? Must we allow access to the natives to their sacred site? The continued restrictions are not only a violation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, but also a violation of our rights to religious freedom as enshrined in our Constitution. Future violations will attract litigation and international embarrassment, he said. First of all, I don't like being bound to anything the UN says. The UN could go their way. They could go bye-bye for my part. But the religious freedom is he requested an end to unequal treatment of groups and better education on the nation's first peoples. Among a list of demands put forth by Simon was a call to the local carnival fraternity to cease referring to indigenous people as wild Indian or red Indian and other terms. Internal structures of governance. Kindly consult with competent members of our community to be advised on correct names, terms, and depictions. Hi, Paradise. So, no more wild Indian in carnival. No more red Indian in carnival. You must consult with the indigenous folk, and they will tell you the proper nomenclature, the proper naming for these characters. What do you think about that? If in culture there was something created through history that is now seen as being insulting, should we bend to it as a culture, as a society? So we don't call them wild Indian anymore. We call them the warrior battle chief. Warao warrior battle chief. And they must now dress in historically accurate indigenous folk wear in order to play carnival with it. Would that work? He said much had been done. He said much had been said about the community to deny it respect and the respect and recognition it deserved. They have said that we are disorganized. This event proves otherwise. They say we don't exist. Well, here we are. They thought they had exterminated us. They fear us because we never surrender. Like, I'll be the offensive one to say some of these things. I'm willing to say it. I mean no offense, but I'm just being realistic in how we discuss these things. He's saying that it was said they didn't exist, but here they are. Where's the proof? There's got to be some proof of that. And, like, is it that the governments are afraid of the indigenous people, really? Because they never surrendered? Is that historically accurate? Tallest, were you trying to put me in? I say, I don't know. I don't know if the man is a chief. I don't know. The man says he is a chief. I am not part of his tribe. I don't know. I don't know if he went through the ritual and really legitimately became chief. What did he say was the purpose for riding across the country on the horse, though? Why did he do it? To promote the indigenous people. Promote them in what way? Or he wants a national holiday for them. Oh, okay. And this is what I started off commenting about with this. When you're in a multicultural society, how much provision do you give for each facet of those multiple cultures? In a multicultural society, does every culture get a holiday? Does every culture get a holiday? Should that be the case, that every culture should get a holiday? Should every culture get an entire month to celebrate them? Should it be that any insult to any culture should be protected under the law? How do you balance that in a multicultural society? Because this indigenous guy that is speaking here in the article I just read is from a separate tribe from Chief Horseman. That's a different tribe. So if any tribe that organizes themselves into a group is given concessions, are you sure we aren't going to see many more tribes start to pop up? Tallest, stop. The guy is the shaman. He is the holy man, the witch doctor for the Warao tribe. He's the healer. I know nothing about him riding a bison. I will not have you. They were just speaking about the manner in which the indigenous people are disrespected. Why must we belittle and disrespect the indigenous people in that manner? Claiming they ride bisons and saying that they ride a horse to death. Do you think that these indigenous people don't have connections with these animals to understand how much they could take? People, that's all I have for now, That's all I have for now. I hope you guys were educated, informed, or entertained. This has been the Mindful Live. Tolly says, I mean, they should get some more exposure since they were here before others. Were they? Are these people direct descendants of those tribes? What's the proof of that? Are we sure about that? Are they actually depicting the tribes accurately? Are they, can they directly link themselves back to the tribe? Or are these just some people with a little Spanish blood that say that they heard their uncle was a native, so now they read up something on some tribe and say that sounds like who I am? Because I'm not saying that these people are those. I am not saying that. But there are people who do that. I want to know the genuine lineage of these people before I say anything. I mean, shouldn't that be a factor? I would think it should. To me. And even then, I don't know how many concessions we can and should give. They're talking about having their own governing structure. Should we as a country allow tribes to have their own governing structure and govern themselves as they see fit? Have their own rulers and own laws, and their laws separate from the country's laws? They can do things differently. Should that be something that we allow in our country? And how much of that would we allow? If one tribe can do it, can another tribe? Can a certain religion? Can a religion decide that we want to govern ourselves based on our religious ideals? And the laws of the country must stand apart from ours? I don't think that would be allowed. I mean, if your laws fall under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, then what laws are you having in the first place? What's the point of having laws on a governing structure if it isn't something separate from Trinidad? Get a holiday and relax, Tolis. Anyway, people, I think I'm out there. That's all I have for now. Be educated, informed, and entertained. I am Nathan Springer. This has been the Mindful Live. Once you're looking at this over on YouTube, if you stuck around this long for the on the repeat, make sure you drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Share it to some people who like that kind of stuff. And I'll see you guys again for the next Mindful Live. We will surely have one on Friday evening. We're looking at if we need to skip one, but once things run well, if you are inside of the Discord server, we'll see whether we are on tomorrow. I'd like to be on tomorrow too, but we'll see. Oh, Mr. Shiv! What's his TikTok account, Torres? What's his TikTok account? I don't know. I don't know the guy on TikTok. What's his TikTok? Grand Chief or something. Alright, I'll look out for it. Alright, people. Until the next one, hold it down. Stay strong. Go make some babies. Populate the land with some good little trainees.